What's going on, my people? This is Blanche Eden. I hope you're having a good night. I'm going to be recording episode number 35 right now, and I'm going to be talking about a sad subject. So it's story time, but it's not necessarily before you go to bed story time. It's disheartening stories. I found some literature on sexual abuse of slaves. And I wanted to talk about sexual abuse in 2019 and how it has everything to do with African American history. I always like to draw the conclusion and put the connection together that a lot of these things that happen in society they were taught to us. I truly believe that, just like the last video I did with the abuse of children and domestic violence and the very heavy connection between those things and slavery and massa. So I found this great article from the National Humanities Center Resource Toolbox, The Making of African American Identity, Volume 1, 1500 to 1865. It is very, very moving. Okay, there is stuff in here that I have never, ever seen or heard in my life. My mouth was on the floor. I had to take a break when I was reading it. It's that type of information. It's very descriptive and it's very disheartening. But I wanted to share it, and just going to share a few stories. There's so many stories, so I can leave the link in the description box below if you want to read the entire document. But I'm going to read a few that stood out to me that I feel just really explain, rape and sexual abuse and incest. I saw a documentary, just really quick. I saw a documentary about Muslims, the Muslim community. I don't know what particular branch of Muslim people, but I just know it was a Muslim religion that married their first cousins. So they just kept marrying their cousins. They stay within a family, which is considered incest in the U.S. And the children, like they say that 1 in 4 kids can come out with deadly genetic disorders. And oh my God, it was the hardest thing to watch. There was one couple that had 4 kids. So 3 out of 4 of the kids they were blind. I mean, this genetic disease destroyed these poor children. I mean, you should see them. They can't do anything on their own, and they're old enough, 14, 15 years old. They're old enough too, but they can't because of this deadly disease that they have. So I figured, and then there was one woman that had a child that has a disorder. He was taking like 50 pills a day. I mean, like, the medical industry is banking off these kids. It's a mess. It's a whole mess. I'll try to find that link and leave it down there too. And maybe I could play a clip from that if I have some time, because it was just really, I mean, there's so, people, there's just so much going on in the world. And if you really don't go out there and look for things, it's just not going to fall in your lap. So it's really good to learn about other cultures, and it's just eye-opening. So it led me to think about incest, because they were willingly committing incest, and they believed that this was okay, and that was their belief. The government is not stopping them from doing it. A lot of the children are coming out with terrible diseases, and they continue to do it. So I'm like, okay, this is pretty awful. But it's a very hush-hush thing. And this was in the UK, actually. It was taking Muslims in the UK was the location of the documentary. And I just thought it was just very eye-opening and very disheartening to see other people's lives. I like to watch stuff like that. So it led me to think about sexual abuse in the Black community and where did it come from? Because, like I said, we didn't ask to come here. We were busy. We were doing our own thing, and then one day this shit happened, right? So where did we learn sexual abuse and incest from? That's not something, I don't believe it's a natural thing. That's just my personal belief. If you disagree, let me know. Put it in the comment section. If you agree, whatever, put it in the comment section. I want to hear what you think. But I don't believe that incest is a natural thing. And after reading these stories here. My God. I definitely felt very secure in my thought because they really went into detail on how, their masters made them do these things. Whether they were married or not, they had to breed. They would take the most beautiful, what they considered to be the most beautiful female and the most, stockiest, healthy male. And they would make them breed with each other and have more healthier slaves. Instead of buying slaves, this is how they would produce slaves and then make money. They would force them to breed. The masters would rape them. The wives would beat the female slave, when the master was cheating. The wife would okay it. She would okay the rape because it meant more slaves for them. There's a lot of adultery and incest and drama going on back in the day. And I'm just like, wow, so forgive me if you knew this already. You don't have to listen to it. But for people who did not know this existed, it's about to get real graphic. So put your seatbelt on. Good luck. Says here, for many enslaved African Americans, one of the cruelest hardships they endured was sexual abuse by the slaveholders, overseers, and other white men and women whose power to dominate them was complete. Enslaved women were forced to submit to their masters' sexual advances, perhaps bearing children who would engender the rage of a master's wife, and from whom they might be separated forever as a result. Masters forcibly paired good breeders to produce strong children they could sell at a high price. Resistance brought severe punishment, often death. I know these facts will seem too awful to relate, warned a former slave William J. Anderson in his 1857 narrative, as they are some of the real dark deeds of American slavery. Presented here are selections from two groups of narratives, 19th century memoirs of fugitive slaves, often published by abolitionist societies, and the 20th century interviews of former slaves compiled in the 1930s by the Works Progress Administration Slave Narrative Project. So that's credit for what I'm reading here. These stories are going to get intense as I go in. So again, if you are sensitive to sexual abuse or rape, just a heads up. It may, I just have to give a heads up because, like I said, it took my breath, so it might take your breath, and I just don't want anybody to be upset. So I'm gonna keep going. First one here says, plenty of the colored women have children by the white men. She know better than to not do what he say. Didn't have much of that until the men from South Carolina came up here, North Carolina, and settle and bring slaves. Then they take them very same children, what have they own blood, and make slaves out of them. If the missus find out, she raised revolution, but she hardly find out. The white men not going to tell, and the nigger women were always afraid to. So they just go on hoping that things won't be that way always. That was a North Carolina slave in 1937. The slave traders would buy young and able farm men and well-developed young girls with fine physique to barter and sell. They would bring them to the taverns where there would be the buyers and traders, display them and offer them for sale. She was of high spirits and determined disposition. At night, she was taken by the trader to his room to satisfy his bestial nature. She could not be coerced or forced, so she was attacked by him. In the struggle, she grabbed a knife, and with it, she sterilized him, and from the result of injury, he died the next day. She was charged with murder. General Butler, hearing of it, sent troops to Charles County in Maryland to protect her. They brought her to Baltimore. Later, she was taken to Washington, where she was set free. This attack was the result of being good-looking, for which many a poor girl in Charles County paid the price. There are several cases I could mention, but they are distasteful to me. There was a doctor in the neighborhood who bought a girl and installed her on the place for his own use. His wife, hearing it, severely beat her. One day, her little child was playing in the yard. It fell head down in a post hole filled with water and drowned. His wife left him. Afterwards, she said it was an affliction put on her husband for his sins. Let me explain to you very plain without prejudice one way or the other. I've had many opportunities, a chance to watch white men and women in my long career. Colored women have many hard battles to fight to protect themselves from assault by employers, white male servants, or by white men, many times not being able to protect themselves in fear of losing their positions. Then, on the other hand, they were subjected to many impositions by the women of the household through women's jealousy. That was Richard Mack's Enslaved in Maryland, 1937. You know, when I read this, it really just, it shocks me. And like I said, it's going to pick up and get a little more intense. But it does shock me. But at the same time, it doesn't, because these things go on. It's just not as severe. But there's sexual harassment at work. There are these things like still take place, but again, just not as severe as they were at this time that I'm reading from. So it's to me, you know, genetics play a big role in this, because I feel like, you know, let's say, for example, and I'm not saying that if your great grandfather was a slave master rapist, that you're going to be a slave master rapist. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that there's a chance that that can happen. That's possible. And it just makes me think that there are people in the world who do this, and there are people in the world who don't do this. Right? Like it's very divided. It's like either you're a rapist or you're not a rapist. It's not like, oh, I rape sometimes, or I feel like raping, but I don't. It's like you're either a rapist or you're not a rapist. You're not an ex-rapist. You're just a rapist. If you rape once, you're a rapist. So it's like, to me, there are people who just don't have this in their mind to rape anyone. And then there are people who do have it in their mind to rape them. And where do they get it from? Is it handed down? Was it done to them? And if it was done to them, it was done to someone first, and then it kept happening. You know, so it is genetic and it is passed down. I'm not saying all the time, and, you know, I'm not making any factual statement. I'm just speaking just from my reading and my common sense. Like, this stuff has been handed down through generations and generations, and it still happens today. Let me do another story here. It says, okay, now this next story I'm going to read, don't laugh at me, because it's written exactly how the person is speaking, and it's not proper English. So I'm going to do my best to try to read it the way it's written here. So don't laugh at me. Darren, one thing Massa Hawkins does to me what I can't shunt from my mind. I knows he don't do it for meanness, but I always holds it against him. What he done and forced me to live with that nigga Rufus against my wants. After I been at he place about a year, the massa come to me and say, you gon' live with Rufus in that cabin over yonder. Go fix it for living. I's about 16 years old and has no learning, and I's just ignomous child. I'm assuming what she's saying is that I'm 16, I don't know anything, and I'm just a child. I thought that him mean for me to tend the cabin for Rufus and some other niggas. Well, that'll start the investigation for me. I took charge of the cabin after work. I'm done and fixed the supper. Now, I don't like that Rufus because he's a bully. He is big, and because he's so, he think everybody do what him say. We uns has supper. Then I goes here and there talking till I's ready for sleep. And then I gets in the bunk. After I's in, that nigga come in and crawl in the bunk with me. For I knows it. I says, what you means, you fool nigga? He says for me to hush the mouth. This is my bunk too, he say. So basically he's trying to rape her and sleep with her. This is what I'm talking about. Like, I'm going to finish this story, but Rufus has been told what he has to do. I don't think that Rufus is just going around raping women. I just have to say, I don't think he's doing that. Rufus just happens to be the type of individual that's gonna do it. If Massa says do it, I gotta do it. Now the girl's like, well, this is my body. Of course, women are probably gonna be a little more subjective to that because it's like you raping me pretty much. But the male is basically trying to rape her and sees nothing wrong with it. He says, this is my bed and you in my bed, but Massa told her to go in his bed. She's not in there by choice. She's in there because she has to be there. He doesn't obviously care. Maybe he's acquired some kind of taste to rape women. Maybe he's in a way enjoying this now. Maybe at first he didn't necessarily enjoy raping women, but now that the master is, maybe he's the main man there, and master sends all the girls in there to have sex with him and have babies. Maybe he feels like, well, you just another pussy. You know what I'm saying? And I mean, I'm just trying to imagine around the situation as best as I can. Like, this is what has to be going on, because he sounds like he's expecting her to do it, like every other girl, I guess, that's maybe been in his bunk. And I just think it's terrible. I mean, basically, black men were forced to rape these women on their own. They had to build up the courage and strength to rape a woman, because if the woman didn't want to do it, which was more than likely, he had to rape her because Massa said to do it. And if they didn't do it, they would either die or be severely punished. So this rape was taking place, and shit, like, this is norm for them. But it's not norm in today's society, and it's still happening. That's what I'm saying. The same thing is happening. A man would say, well, you in my bed and your clothes are off. I have a right to have sex with you. The law says no. I can get all the way down to my drawers and still say no to you. And if you have sex with me, you rape me. If I'm saying no and you continue to have sex, you are raping me. So it's the same situation in the bunk with this lady and this man. It's no different than today. But my point is that it was forced. This is just why slavery, African-American slavery, is so repulsive and so awful, because they made them go in there and do that. And if they didn't do it, and then the sad thing is, it sounds like Rufus is liking this shit. Like, he's starting, like, this is like game to him. You know what I'm saying? He's like, you in my bed. She said he's a bully. He's aggressive. You know what I'm saying? So maybe that's why Massa picked him, because he's going to rape the women and make them do it. This is disgusting. Let me finish the story, because I'm just getting worked up. Okay. You's touched in the head. Get out, I told him. And I's put the feet against him and give him a shove, and out he go on the floor. For he know what I's doing. That nigga jump up and he mad. He look like the wild boar. He starts for the bunk, and I jumps quick for the poker. I'm about 3 feet long, and when he comes at me, I lets him have it over the head. Did that nigga stop in his tracks? I said he did. He looks at me steady for a minute, and yous could tell he thinking hard. Then he go and sit on the bench and say, just wait, you thinks it I'm smart, but yous I'm a foolish in the head. They's gonna larn you something. Hush you's big mouth and stay away from this nigga. That's all I wants, I say. And just sets and hold that poker in the hand. He just sits looking like the bull. There we in set and sets for about an hour, and then he go out and I bars the door. I guess she locks up the door. Oh, it's not finished. Okay. The next day, I goes to the missy, the master's wife or the mistress, and tells her what Rufus wants, and Missy say, Dad'm the master's wishes. She say, yous am the portly gal and Rufus and the portly man. The master wants you uns for to bring forth portly children. So this is norm for the wife. She's not really, I mean, I guess the girl in her head is going, somebody's got to help me. Let me tell what happened. All the time, all while everybody's like, honey, you're late to the party. Okay, go in there and get that ass up and have some children. This is terrible. It's the worst thing ever. You know, and I can't help but think that Rufus's son's son or daughter, Rufus's daughter's son, and down generation, this has to affect people in some way, shape, or form. There's no way that Rufus is a rapist and his children may see what he's doing and copy it, or maybe they don't copy it, or maybe it's genetically handed down to them and they have that aggressive gene in them. I don't know what it is, but it's still happening today. So obviously there's some type of link between that time and right now. And I just think it's crazy. Like I'm putting two and two together. Forgive me. I was thinking about what the Missy say, but say to myself, I was not going to live with that Rufus. That night when him come in the cabin, I grabs the poker and sits on the bench and says, get away from me, nigga, for I bust your brains out and stomp on them. He says nothing and gets out. So the poker might be like a stick or something. I think that's what she means by the poker. It's a stick. She about to poke him, hit him with the stick. The next day, the master called me and tell me, woman, I's paid big money for you, and I's done that for the cause I once used to raise me children. I's put you to live with Rufus for that purpose. Now, if you doesn't want whipping at the stake, you do what I want. I think about massa buying me. This is where it gets really sad. Okay, this line is really sad, and it makes me really sad. I thinks about massa buying me often off the auction block and saving me from being separated from my folks and about being whipped at the stake. Dear it am, what am I to do? So I sides to do as the master wish, and so I yields. I never marries, cause one experience I'm enough for this nigga. After what I does for the master, I's never wants to truck with any man. The Lord forgive this colored woman, but he have to excuse me for and look for some others for to plenish the earth. So it's her mindset. You understand the manipulation that the slave master just said to her? He just acted like he did her a motherfucking favor by buying her, and now you owe me. This is some fucked up bullshit. In her mind, she's grateful. It's all just fucked up. It's just all just fucked up, and it's a huge form of manipulation, and it's tragic, and it's terrible that she thinks in her head she has to do this for Master because he bought her and from getting whipped. And now she feels obligated. And now she doesn't want to get married. Now she's traumatized. She wants nothing to do with men because it's a horrible experience. She's 16, people. 16 years old. Could you imagine? That was one of the worst stories. And there was another one. Oh, this one is bad. This is going to be the last one because I'm already at 25 minutes. My master often went to the house, got drunk, and then came out to the field to whip, cut, slash, curse, swear, beat, and knock down several for the smallest offense or nothing at all. He divested a poor female slave of all wearing apparel, tied her down to the stakes, and whipped her with a handsaw until he broke it over her naked body. In process of time, he ravished her person and became the father of a child by her. Basically, he stripped all her clothes off, beat the crap out of her, and raped her and impregnated her. This is the most awful shit I've ever heard in my life. Besides, he always kept a colored miss in the house with him. This is another curse of slavery, concubinage, and illegitimate connections, which is carried on to an alarming extent in the far South. A poor slave man who lives close by his wife is permitted to visit her, but very seldom, and other men, both white and colored, cohabit with her. Are you listening to this? They're pimping her with her husband to see her. They're running. They're pimping her. She's being raped by several men. And she's a married woman. It is undoubtedly the worst place of incest and bigamy in the world. A white man thinks nothing of putting a colored man out to carry the four row, which is the front row in the field work, and carry on the same sport with the colored man's wife at the same time. I know these facts will seem too awful to relate, but I am constrained to write of such revolting deeds, as they are some of the real dark deeds of American slavery. Then, kind reader, pursue my narrative, remembering that I give no fiction in my details of horrid scenes. Nay, believe with me that the half can never be told of the misery the poor slaves are still suffering in this so-called land of freedom. Still suffering in this so-called land of freedom. When I read these passages, and there's so many more, I'm going to leave the link below. They're like a ugly, beautiful thing. They're ugly and awful, but very beautiful at the same time, because you can't believe how terrible these people were. Every time I research about slavery, it just gets more and more intense. But how it connects to now, like, we are literally still slaves. People say it all the time, we're still slaves. And this really confirms it. This really just knocks the door down on it, because we are doing this to each other still. We were made to do these things. Yes, we were made to do them. But now we are not made to do them anymore. Nobody is forcing you to force yourself upon a woman. Nobody's forcing you to pimp a woman. That's basically what they were doing. They learned these things from their masters. And you better believe they did it to each other. You better believe it. And we're still doing it to each other. Like, subscribe, share if you like this podcast, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you.